Number 5 on this list is the tattoo artist. In today's world, you don't always need to be a cop or investigator to solve crimes. With the internet and the fact that literally everything that we do is documented at all times, people are more than capable of solving a crime from the comfort of their own home. That's kind of what went down in this case. Ranker writes, tattoo artist and 19th century antiques collector Greg May was murdered, and it took a year for police and federal investigators to prove that he was dead. All they knew was that his former roommate had stolen his $70,000 collection. It wasn't until they were contacted by Ellen Leach, an e-detective who was trying to solve what she thought was a different murder with information about a severed head found in a bucket full of concrete. Once they got contacted by her, they were able to charge the ex-roommate with murder. So first off, this crime is absolutely horrifying. It's honestly the nature of this crime which has rocketed this internet case onto this list. Like, if I actually start to try and imagine dying by a chainsaw, it just kind of makes me feel ill inside. And what's even more sick about this is that if it wasn't because of the internet, the killer would have got away with it. Ellen Leach, however, is a pro at doing what I suggested earlier, solving crimes from the comfort of her own home. She literally is an internet detective and has dedicated herself to the craft. From my findings, it seems that Ellen Leach has been instrumental in not only this case, but in solving 7 other cases around the United States. That is a sizable amount of influence that Ellen's got, and a lot of families can thank her for doing what she does. I personally can't even imagine how taxing it must be sitting at your desk literally the entire day trying to find a chainsaw killer. Definitely not the sort of profession that I could do, but really happy that we've got people like Ellen out here that can. Number 4 on this list is the hitman. Alright, so this case is honestly less terrifying and more just stupid if you ask me. If you're a hitman, then you have to be extremely discreet. After all, you're literally selling your services to a buyer who will want you to take the life of another human being. This obviously isn't even remotely close to being legal or morally right, and secrecy has got to be the name of the game. That's why it was absolutely ridiculous when a guy, actually unnamed, made a Facebook account to advertise his skills as a contract killer. He was smart enough to use a fake name, so he named this Facebook account Anthrax, but clearly this level of intelligence didn't translate to a visual medium. My dude literally used his own face in the photos of the profile. Well, obviously it didn't take very long before the police got wind of this and arrested this guy. They were able to do so before he was contracted to kill anyone, and honestly never even found out if he was a real contract killer or just a loser in a basement trying to mess with people. Now, what makes this story scary though is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. This was one dumb guy who posted stuff on Facebook, and the Facebook community responded very quickly and took him down. But there are way more intelligent people than this guy in the world who are real and trained contract killers using the internet. Facebook, Craigslist, eBay, they've all seen people pose as other people and use their platform as a space for evil. These are also only the platforms that we're all familiar with. I've never seen it for myself personally, but apparently the dark web has tons of sites where you can literally find reputable hitmen at the click of a button. The internet can occasionally be great and solve some crimes, but don't get it twisted, guys. The internet can also host those same crimes as well. Number 3 on this list is the Grateful Doe hitchhiker. This is one of the most famous internet cases of all time. What Culture says, in 1995, 21-year-old student Michael Hager picked up a 19-year-old hitchhiker traveling from a Grateful Dead concert. The two were making their way to their respective destinations, Hager to his mother's house in South Carolina, when something caused the Volkswagen transporting the men to crash into a tree. Both died. As Hager didn't know the boy who was riding with him, his family didn't know either. When they came to identify Hager's remains, none could identify the hitchhiker, and nobody came out to report him missing. Since his real identity was unknown, he was given the name Grateful Doe because of the Grateful Dead concert. There were reconstructions made of Grateful Doe's face and a number of small distinctive tattoos that people could work to identify. However, for many years there was no luck until Australian Reddit user Layla Betts started posting about Grateful Doe online, leading to the creation of the subreddit Grateful Doe. Someone saw the posts and claimed that the reconstructions looked like his former roommate. That roommate was named James Callahan. With Callahan's photos beginning to circulate online, his mother came forward and revealed that her son had in fact gone missing 20 years earlier. The police were later able to confirm that Grateful Doe was in fact James Callahan. I think what makes this so scary is when you consider the perspective of the mother. Her son goes off to a concert and just literally never comes home ever. You can't call him, you can't email him, you have absolutely no way of knowing who he was with last. Like, that would have been pure mental agony for years. And as horrible as it sounds, probably the news that he died, that might have been a bit of a relief to her. Even though that's a horrible thought, at the very least, she can get closure and move on with her life. So at least we can thank the internet for that one. Number 2 on this list is the murder of Crystal Theobald. Crystal Theobald was taken from the world far too soon. Her family, obviously extremely distraught, would not rest until justice was served. What Culture writes, after Theobald was shot dead at age 24, her mother and cousin made a fake MySpace profile in her image. They used it to find the identities of a group of local gang members who they believed were involved in her killing, luring them in with Theobald's picture and then catfishing them in the messages. By doing this, they were able to eventually find the owner of the car that had been at the scene of her death, the people in the car, and the events leading up to the fatal shootout. Police weren't too happy with the family's amateur sleuthing, but in the end, they were able to find useful information. With the family's investigation, they were able to find who was responsible for Crystal's death and make some arrests and convictions, giving the family some of the closure that they needed. I can't even begin to comprehend how hard that process would have been for the family searching for their daughter's own killers. Also, it's a little questionable to me that the police weren't too happy with the amateur sleuthing. Like, I don't claim to know anything about investigating, and I will be the first one to admit that I am super ignorant towards the process and procedures in catching a killer. However, you would think that the police should be happy with the family, especially considering the only reason they ended up getting to the bottom of the crime was because of what the family did. I guess the family didn't really care what the police thought about it though, because they needed to find their daughter's killers. Thanks to the power of the internet, they were able to do so. And finally, number 1 on this list is Grandma's Code. This one is super eerie, and even though it comes to a happy ending, still a bit creepy. Jana's grandmother passed away from cancer over 20 years ago. Before she passed, she wrote this encoded note. She left it for her family, but didn't give them a code or anything like that to solve it. Obviously, if the family couldn't solve it for 20 years though, it was a pretty freaking hard puzzle. That's when, enter in, Reddit. Jana posted the encryption on Reddit, and I kid you not, literally less than half an hour goes by and somebody solved it. It turned out that the encryption was actually a code for several prayers. Each letter stood for the first letter in a word in what would amount to a different prayers or messages to God. She didn't say anything crazy or anything like that, just a bunch of prayers to God as her final words. But what's insane and really creepy about this is she was basically talking to us from the grave. If you think about it, she sent this message 20 years ago while she was alive, and we only received it right now. Pretty eerie if you ask me. Number 5 on this list is the case of Carolee Sadie Ashby. A horrible and scary case that took over 50 years to solve and was only ever solved due to the internet. What Culture writes, solving a mystery that's been plaguing a family for almost half a century can sometimes start with something as simple as a Facebook post, and that's what just happened in solving a 1968 hit-and-run case. After going down to the shops on Halloween, 4-year-old Carolee Sadie Ashby was hit by a drunk driver who didn't so much as stop to check on her. The case had haunted Russ Johnson of the Fulton Police Department for years, and no leads eventually led to the case to go cold. On retiring, he took a chance, posting details of the incident to a Facebook page that dealt with local history. From there, a woman reached out to him and they had their first lead in decades. The woman used to live in the area and told Johnson about how local man Douglas Parkhurst had asked her to give him an alibi if the police were to speak to her. She explains that she rejected his request, not knowing what he might be needing an alibi for, but secretly suspecting it could be related to Carolee's death. All those years later, the police department reopened the case and questioned Parkhurst again. Clearly, having a few decades to let his guilt stew had changed Parkhurst's outlook, and he admitted to killing the girl, having been drinking that night before getting behind the wheel. This was 50 years removed, and so the statute of limitation had changed, and therefore Parkhurst actually couldn't even be charged. This was really sad for the family of this girl, obviously, but at the very least, they discovered who did it. This is super real and just so sad, honestly. A girl as young as that to be taken so soon and unexpectedly at the hands of a drunk driver. It's good to see the internet figure this one out, but the best case scenario would have been that it just never happened at all. Number 4 on this list is Sam Whitehorn. Okay, so I'll be honest guys, this one isn't quite as terrifying as some of the other ones on this list, but it really hit home with me, so it's making the list. I am a massive Green Bay Packers fan, have been for years, and will be for years to come. That team has already put me through so much emotional agony, but it seems that fellow Packers fan Sam Whitehorn got some physical agony instead. Sam was in Portland walking around with a Green Bay Packers beanie on. The altercation happened when several Seattle Seahawks fans approached him and started getting very aggressive. It escalated and they beat Sam senselessly, sending him to the ER. Just as quickly as they came though, they were gone, and with no idea who they were, it was impossible to direct the police to them. Well, Sam's girlfriend posted this story on the internet and it started making waves. So much so that the Green Bay Packers organization themselves stumbled upon it and used their resources to post it everywhere. To my knowledge, this led to the discovery of these men and ultimately their arrest. Sports is great fun and it's a roller coaster of a ride, but these guys took it to a place that it never should have gone. Number 3 on this list is the discovery of William Earl Moult. William Earl Moult was a man who lived in Florida back in the 90s. On November 7th, 1997, William went missing, and it literally took 22 years before anyone found him. The case had gone completely cold, and nobody had any idea what the heck happened to Will. Enter in the internet and Google Earth. A technology that literally wasn't even around back when William was alive was the thing that finally found him. William was found immersed in water in his vehicle behind some houses in Florida. Behind these houses in Florida, they have a backyard, and then a little bit behind that is just a tiny lake out back. It really isn't that far at all from the homes, but the water is mucky and gross. Barry Fay is the person who lives in the house that's closest to where William was found, and it was a neighbor to Barry who was on Google Earth when they spotted the car. The police went to go check it out, and sure enough, they found an extremely calcified car and the remains of William Earl Moult. He must have been driving down this road on the evening of November 7th, swerved into the lake, and done so in a fashion that nobody recognized. It's impossible to say whether it was the crash that killed him, or if he drowned in the lake, or if he was already dead behind the wheel when he drove into the water. Either way, I think what's super scary about this case is the fact that this was literally behind someone's home. Really makes you wonder what sort of stuff do I have out back of my home that I haven't come across yet. Number 2 on this list is the Strongsville skeleton. This is one where Reddit was able to get to the bottom of an icy cold case. What Culture writes, lots of interesting things have been discovered on Reddit, but this really takes the cake. The website helped find the identity of a skeleton based on research that was carried out a decade before the birth of the internet. Back in 1975, a trio of boys found a skeleton in the woods of Strongsville, Ohio. They further noted that the body was that of a white woman in her early 20s, but that was about all they could gather. Fast forward a few decades, and a woman called Christina Skates began uploading her research into the case on Unsolved Mysteries, another popular amateur detective site called Websooths. Thanks to her information and the images of the skull, an artist called Carl Kopelman was able to put together a reconstruction of what the skeleton may have looked like when alive. The illustration ended up looking strongly similar to Linda Pagano, a woman who had been reported missing a year before the skeleton was discovered. DNA testing put this theory to task, and it was confirmed that the unidentified remains could now be identified as Linda. I can't imagine being that family of Linda and hearing literally almost 50 years later that those remains found so many years ago was her. Also too, just the story of the boys stumbling upon the skeleton, like, that's kind of creepy in its own right. It's still impossible to know who actually killed Linda, but being able to give the family some closure is still important nonetheless. And finally, number 1 on this list is the post-it note mystery. This one honestly really struck a chord with me and is truly terrifying. What Culture says, in 2015, Reddit user R. Bradbury 1920 posted to a legal advice thread asking what people thought of his predicament. He kept finding post-it notes around his apartment, and given that he lived alone, he figured that it must be his landlord leaving them when he wasn't in. This is a problem because usually you need to be alerted when your landlord is coming into your home, never mind if they plan on leaving things behind like cryptic notes. It became even more of a problem because it wasn't his landlord at all, and suddenly the man was faced with the real mystery of who was coming into his house and leaving notes for him. A bunch of theories were floated, even including multiple personality disorder, but eventually one stuck. It was carbon monoxide poisoning, causing him to forget that he had left himself notes. Sure enough, he installed a CO2 alarm and found that he was being slowly poisoned. If it weren't for the fellow user making the suggestion, that OP may have well ended up dead. Can you imagine being slowly poisoned and not knowing it at all? In your own home as well, where you're supposed to be safe. Then having that poison affect you so much that you're literally lying in this dreamlike state, forgetting everything that you do. This sounds like something written by the writers of Fight Club, honestly. It's just so creepy to me to think that someone can get to the point where they aren't even aware of their own actions anymore. Like, what if this is happening to me or you right now, and we just don't even know it because we keep forgetting? Really creepy stuff. Number 5 on this list is the Fermi paradox. This one is all about aliens, but maybe not how you might expect. Science Focus says, in 1950, Enrico Fermi, the man who built the first nuclear reactor, was having lunch in the canteen of the Los Alamos bomb lab in New Mexico when he suddenly said, "Where is everybody?" Everyone around the table knew exactly what he meant. Decades later, Fermi's question was examined independently by the American physicists Michael Hart and Frank Tipler. Hart considered aliens spreading throughout our Milky Way, and Tipler considered self-replicating machines that, on arrival at a planetary system, exploit the resources to build 2 copies of themselves that continue voyaging. Both concluded that even at modest speeds of travel, every star in the galaxy would be visited in a fraction of the age of the Milky Way. As Fermi realized, the aliens should be here on Earth. They do not appear to be, though. This became the Fermi paradox. Hundreds of explanations have been proposed. They include the ideas that we are the first intelligence to arise in the galaxy and so are totally alone, and that we are a nursery world off limits to advanced civilizations that might adversely affect our development. A more mundane possibility is that there is no paradox because any signs of visitation in the distant past would be erased by wind, rain, and geological processes. Recently, however, a team led by Dr. Jonathan Carroll Nellenbach of the University of Rochester, New York, has proposed that our sun may simply have been bypassed by a wave of extraterrestrial expansion. So why are aliens not here? Have they already been here and we didn't even know? Or did they just bypass our solar system altogether? Or is all of this nonsense and the universe is just so big that they haven't gotten to us yet? It's certainly something interesting to think about. Considering the universe is infinite and there are so many places and planets we don't know about, it seems ridiculous to think that we're the only intelligent life or the first intelligent life in everything. Like, that's as if we hit the biggest lottery ever. Comment down below what you think about this alien question and why aren't they here yet? Number 4 on this list is dark matter. You've definitely heard the term dark matter get thrown around a bunch before, and you've probably wondered, what the heck is it? Well, if that sounds like you, then you aren't alone. Scientists all across the globe are still wondering what dark matter is and the purpose that it serves. Science Focus says dark matter gives out no light or too little light for us to detect. We know it exists because we see the effect of its gravity on the visible stars and galaxies. For instance, the Milky Way could not have dragged in enough matter to make its stars in the 13.82 billion years since the Big Bang, without there being a lot of invisible matter whose extra gravity speeded things up. The European Space Agency's Planck satellite found that dark matter accounts for 26.8% of the mass energy of the universe, compared with the 4.3% of normal atomic energy. It therefore outweighs the visible stars and galaxies by a factor of 6. Puzzlingly, no Earth-based experiment has found any evidence of dark matter despite decades of searching. It is conceivable that it's not our theory of matter that needs modification, but our theory of gravity. Or that dark matter is not a fluid made of a single particle, but is complex like the atomic matter we see around us. Maybe the universe is filled with dark stars and dark planets and dark life. There is an entire universe of dark matter that we don't even know about. Like, what the heck is this stuff and what's it composed of? Why can't our eyes see it? Why doesn't something this dense even show up? It's all very confusing and nobody can figure it out right now. Dark matter is one of the biggest mysteries in the universe, and understanding what it is and how it works could completely change our understanding of gravity and matter as a whole. Hopefully NASA can get a grasp on it soon and the mystery can finally be solved. Number 3 on this list is the central black hole. At the center of almost every single known galaxy in the universe, which there are about 2 trillion of, there is a huge black hole just chilling in the middle. These aren't your everyday typical black holes though, they are gargantuan in size and weight. Some of these beasts weigh around 50 billion times that of our sun. Just an absolutely insane number that our brains truly can't really comprehend. But how did this absolute unit of a black hole get there, and why is it so big? Well, NASA doesn't really know, and they are desperately trying to find out. Black holes are one of the most interesting things in our universe, and one of the things that we know very little about. The question of where does a black hole actually go to will probably never be answered, because we'll never be able to go inside without getting completely crushed into oblivion. But figuring out why they're in the middle of pretty much every notable galaxy is important. If we can understand this, then we can understand how a galaxy is formed and potentially the lifespan of certain galaxies. Also, knowing what creates these black holes will help us better understand them and see if our planet will ever be at risk of such a disaster. Granted, maybe ignorance is bliss in this case, because even if we knew a black hole was coming, there's really nothing that we'd be able to do about it. Number 2 on this list is dark energy. For a long time, the only force that was thought to be operating on the entire universe was gravity. This was everywhere in the universe and decided pretty much how things played out. Gravity is not alone anymore though, or at least since the discovery of dark energy. Dark energy is this invisible force that is everywhere in the universe and is partially responsible for speeding up the expansion of said universe. Apparently, this energy overtook gravity 5 billion years ago as the dominant force that's expanding the universe, and that's why it's happening in the first place. The thing is, we have no idea what this dark energy is or why it's here. Similar to dark matter, it feels like this has just appeared, and because we can't see it or have no idea of its origin, we have no idea how much weight it really has on us and our current laws of physics. Apparently 2/3 of the energy mass of the universe is made up of this stuff, and we have no idea about it. That's kind of scary if you think about it, and it puts in perspective how little we know about things. Oftentimes, I think we fall into a trap assuming that our species is far more advanced than it actually is, but when you consider that we have no idea where 2/3 of the energy mass in our universe came from, or what it is, it really brings you back to reality. I feel like this might be one of the hardest mysteries on this list to solve, and it's gonna take a while. And number 1 on this list is the multiverse. What seems to be the staple of a plotline of any good sci-fi movie these days is the multiverse, something that we truly know nothing about. The theory is basically that there is an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities and outcomes, and it's all just freaking infinite, and honestly kind of hurts my brain to think about for very long. But is there any substance to this theory? How will we be able to know if it's true or not, and what would that mean for us? So the multiverse theory all comes from another theory called inflation theory. Inflation theory is the thinking that in basically a second, when our universe was just a baby, everything started inflating and growing super fast. expanding outwards in all directions. Now, it's thought that the inflation of our universe stopped 14 billion years ago, but that when our universe stopped, the beginning of another started, and so on and so forth. It's very complicated, and in all honesty, I don't really understand all of it, but that's the bare bones. There's also the thinking that because life is so hard to support, as in you need so many things to go right in the universe, it seems extremely unlikely that if there is only one universe, life would have actually formed. If there were multiple or infinite universes, there would be enough chances though that one or more are bound to have the necessary things to create life. Either way, if this is true, then it obviously changes a lot of things about how we view our universe and the role we play in it. Maybe there's another version of you just chilling in a totally alternate universe right now, except instead of hands you have wings or something. A little ridiculous, I know, but if universes are infinite, then you never know.
Coming in at number 5, we have the narwhal tusk. If any of you have ever seen the movie Elf, then you're familiar with the cute narwhal in the beginning of the movie, and that movie really brought narwhals to the public's attention and making this sea creature more popular than ever before, but so much about this creature is a mystery. In 1577, the English explorer Martin Frobisher led an expedition of 150 men to the northern Canada in search of gold, but they had come across something they had never intended, and that was the sea unicorn. The myth of the unicorn goes back centuries, and the business of unicorn horn trade was sustained through the Middle Ages and Renaissance by Vikings who killed the so-called sea unicorns, cut off their horns and sold them for an astronomical price. As European naturalists became more familiar with the world's animal, the myth of the unicorn faded, but mystery of the sea unicorn continued. Frobisher's discovery was actually what we know today as the narwhal, but the horn itself continues to be speculated by many. But the horn is apparently not a horn at all, but is a tooth. The relatives of narwhals include species like the beluga whales, orcas and dolphins, but the mystery remains of how did this massive freakish tooth evolve in this one specific species, after its ancestors branched off from whales with ordinary teeth. Many scientists and researchers debate about what this tooth is used for, and some suggest it's an acoustic probe, a rudder, an ice picker, or a spear for battling predators. These creatures don't make it easy for researchers to see them use their tusk for anything at all, so it makes many people continue to question it. Many have come up with many different theories about this so-called horn and what they use it for and why they have it. It has created a huge debate between researchers and scientists to this day, but no definite answer has come out to this day. In at number 4, we have the submarine disappearances in 1968. This is one giant mysterious situation, which is the disappearance of 4 submarines from 4 different countries in 1968. The USS Scorpion, a Soviet submarine K-129, a French submarine Minerve, and the INS Dakar went inexplicably missing over just a 5-month period, and the last 2 disappearing only 4 days apart. The exact causes of these sinkings remain unknown and remain a mystery over 50 years later. The INS Dakar was scheduled to arrive in Israel on January 29, 1968. When it didn't return, searchers went out to find it, but after a while there was no sign of the missing submarine. So the search ended on February 4th, and the 69-man crew was officially declared dead in 1981. The cause of the sinking was never determined, and theories say that either a mechanical or human error caused a catastrophic accident, or that the submarine snorkel was damaged after hitting another ship, causing it to flood. The Minerve was on the training operation in the Mediterranean on January 27, 1968, and when they were on their way home, the men were caught in a bad storm. When it was 30 miles away from the port, the Minerve made contact with the men on land and said it would port in about an hour, but an hour came and went, and the submarine had never returned. A frantic search was conducted with 20 vessels and aircrafts trying to locate the Minerve, but it was eventually called off on February 2nd when they found nothing. The K-129 with a crew of 98 descended on March 8, 1968, and almost 2 weeks into patrol on the North Pacific, the K-129 failed to send a scheduled radio message. The Soviets soon began a frantic search, and after 2 months of no sign of the submarine, they gave up their search. The cause of the ship sinking remains unknown and will likely never be known. Almost 3 months after the K-129, the USS Scorpion, a nuclear-powered attack submarine with a crew of 99 men, went missing in the Atlantic while on its way back from a patrol in the Mediterranean. It was sent out on February 15, 1968, and toward the end of its patrol, it radioed that it was expected to return on May 27th. But as you can guess, the USS Scorpion would never return. Like the others, many searched for the lost ship, but on June 5th, the Scorpion and its crew were declared presumed lost. Over the years, there have been multiple searches for for these submarines, but only parts have been recovered, and it's considered one of the biggest mysteries that happened in the sea. No one knows why so many went missing in such a short amount of time, how exactly they went missing for so long, and what exactly made these vessels disappear, and this is a mystery we may never get the answer to. Coming in at number 3, we have the Bermuda Triangle. Named for the triangular shape of around 500,000 square miles of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, for centuries the Bermuda Triangle has been mystified as a harrowing patch of ocean where sailors and pilots are prone to lose contact with the natural world and disappear forever. Back when Christopher Columbus first sailed the area, he claimed to see a giant ball of light in the sky that crashed into the horizon and made it glow. Soon after, all sorts of strange events happened in the area, including several boats mysteriously disappearing, and in one incident in 1945, an entire squadron of US torpedo bombers vanished into thin air due to all these weird instances, giving this place the name the Devil's Triangle. The exact number of ships and airplanes that have disappeared is not known, but it's estimated that around 50 ships and 20 planes have been victim to the Bermuda Triangle, and many of these mysterious disappearances of these ships and planes have never been recovered. Many see the Bermuda Triangle as a real phenomenon and have multiple theories to try and explain this mysterious place, and some of these theories are human error, paranormal explanations, violent weather like hurricanes, the Gulf Stream, which is a major surface current within the ocean, methane hydrates, which is a form of natural gas that causes bubbles to form around the ship and ultimately sink it without warning. All of these are only theories, and the Bermuda Triangle to this day is the most notorious sea legend of all time. In at number 2, we have the Gulf of Mexico's cursed shipwreck. An estimated 4,000 shipwrecks litter the seabed across the stretch of water, and the Gulf of Mexico is one of the wealthiest locations for maritime archaeology in the world. In February 2001, oil workers for ExxonMobil were laying some pipeline when they happened to stumble upon a shipwreck about 2,600 feet deep. After discovering the wreckage, a team was assembled to explore this mysterious ship, but nothing seemed to go right. The exploration submarine malfunctioned right as it was getting ready to go down to check out the wreck, and that was only the beginning of these mysterious malfunctions. Others include video monitors going out whenever they fired their thrusters, sonars breaking, and hydraulics going haywire with no explanation for any of these problems. After nothing working and things continuing to break, the Navy sent a researcher submarine down to investigate the wreckage, and on the way down it suddenly self-destructed, and somehow when it finally did get to the wreck, its arms were too short to reach anything. 6 months later, in July in 2002, a team working aboard the NR-1 decided to launch a robotic sub down to the wreck site, but the malfunctions continued. The second the rover entered the water, it veered to the right and went out of control. The tether had caught in the propellers, which caused the vessel to smash into the underside of the ship, and the rover was never recovered. Later in the summer of 2002, the curse would continue as a ship from Sustainable Sea Program of the NOAA offered to pick up artifacts from the site. The first time the vessel attempted to leave the dock, debris was lodged in the propeller. The second time, the propeller locked and the ship ended up in dry lock, needing repairs. Over the years, many others have tried to learn more about this wreck, but little was found, and what was found wasn't at all helpful. To this day, nothing has been able to get too close to the shipwreck to investigate and explore the phenomenon, and very little is known about this mysterious ship. Many believe the lives lost in the wreck continue to haunt the ship and will keep anyone and everything out of it at all costs. And finally, in at number 1, we have the unmapped ocean floor. This is truly one of the biggest mysteries, and humans' curiosity about the Earth's floor is centuries old. Much remains to be learned about the ocean, especially exploring the mystery of the deep sea. From mapping and describing the physical, biological, geological, chemical, and archaeological aspects of the ocean and understanding their dynamics. For centuries, scholars believed the deep sea to be a lifeless place. Until the late 19th century, we've discovered there is a diversity of life and creatures living down there. Many researchers and divers had tried to dive and take submarines down to explore more of this unknown place, but it's very hard due to the extremely cold temperatures, the darkness, and the literally bone-shattering pressure that's more than 1,000 times that at sea level. In 2019, a retired naval officer, Victor Vescovo, set a new record as one of the deepest dives to date, reaching almost 36,000 feet down in a submarine into the deepest place on Earth, the Marianas Trench. The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface, driving weather, regulating temperature, and ultimately supporting all life's organisms. Throughout history, the ocean has been a vital source of sustenance, transport, commerce, growth, and inspiration. But to this day, more than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored, and it's still still unknown how deep the ocean really is. Given the high degree of difficulty and cost in exploring our ocean using underwater vehicles, researchers have relied heavily on technologies such as sonar to generate maps of the seafloor, but currently less than 10% of the global ocean is mapped using modern sonar technology, and only about 35% of the United States have been mapped using modern methods. As we go deeper into the ocean floor, it's too deep for this modern technology because it's too remote and dark for this type of visual mapping. So if you go swimming in the ocean, it's very unknown of what is swimming and living below you. But scientists and researchers continue to develop technologies to unlock the many secrets of the ocean. The NOAA is working to increase our understanding of the ocean realm. Coming in at 5, a ghost town. Ever since its very first day, Glastonbury seems to have been a ghost town. In 1761, Bennington drew the boundaries on the map without even setting foot on the land. At the time of Vermont's first census as a new state in 1791, only 6 families inhabited it. These first settlers found life on Glastonbury Mountain difficult, as would residents ever after. By 1800, they had been replaced by 8 entirely different families. Of these 8, only 3 would stay on until the next census 10 years later, and only one of these would remain in later decades. By the late 1880s, however, the mountain had been cleared of nearly all of its mature trees, and the town's economy dipped dramatically. In 1889, the railroad operation ceased. It was revived very briefly in 1894 as an electric passenger trolley run by the Bennington and Woodford Railroad, and a brief and initially promising effort was made to convert South Glastonbury to a tourist attraction. Unfortunately, though, a freshet wiped out the railroad tracks that winter, marking the beginning of the end of Glastonbury as a functioning town. The town was unincorporated by an act of the state legislature in 1937 and is now essentially a ghost town. The population was 8 at the 2010 census. Along with Somerset, Glastonbury is one of the 2 Vermont towns where the population levels have dropped so low that the town is unincorporated. The town has no local government and the town's affairs are handled by a state-appointed supervisor. Coming in at 4, strange occurrences. Reports of strange lights in the sky and sounds with no explanation have constantly been reported in the Bennington Triangle area. These reports have led to speculation that there are UFOs and perhaps wormholes in the area. However, the strangest report may very well be that of the Bennington Monster. Thought to be an early Bigfoot, the monster has been described as well over 6 feet tall, with hair from its head to its toes. The first sighting was reported in the early 19th century when it supposedly rushed a stagecoach on a washed-out road. The beast apparently knocked the stagecoach onto its side and fled into the dark with a roar. In 1967, another monster would appear on the mountain, the wild man of Glastonbury who lived in a cave near Somerset. Reports say that he would often descend into nearby Glastonbury in the Bennington Triangle in order to harass women. He did this by pulling open his coat and revealing his naked body while waving around a gun and scaring off anyone who would stop him. However, things didn't end there. In 1892, a sawmill worker, Henry McDowell, drunkenly bludgeoned a co-worker to death with a rock after he heard voices telling him to attack. He was ultimately committed to an asylum but managed to escape and just vanished. In at number 3, the disappearances. The Bennington Triangle's most enduring mystery surround the disappearances that plagued the area between 1945 to 1950. During that time period, several people vanished on or near Glastonbury Mountain. The first to disappear was a 75-year-old man named Mitty Rivers, who served as a mountain guide. He was leading a group back to their camp in November 1945 when he got too far ahead of them and out of sight. In that short amount of time, he vanished into thin air. Now, it is unlikely that he became lost considering he was an experienced mountain guide. However, that still doesn't negate the fact that he was never seen again. Paula Jean Weldon disappeared next at the age of just 18 years old on December 1st, 1946. Weldon was a sophomore at Bennington College. She had set out on a hike on the long trail and was alleged to have been seen on the trail itself by an elderly couple who were about 100 yards behind her. According to them, she turned a corner in the trail and then she was gone. A search was conducted but no remains or evidence was ever found. Next was James Tedford, a veteran who went missing on December 1st, 1949, exactly 3 years after Paula Weldon disappeared. He was a resident of the Bennington Soldiers' Home and had been visiting relatives and was returning home on the local bus bus when he vanished. According to witnesses, Tedford got on the bus and remained on the bus until the last stop before Bennington. However, somewhere between the last stop and Bennington, Tedford vanished. His belongings were still in the luggage rack and an open bus timetable was on his vacant seat. The fourth person to disappear was 8-year-old Paul Jepson on October 12, 1950. He had accompanied his mother in a truck, during which time she left her son unattended while she fed some pigs. His mother was gone for around an hour, and when she returned, her son was nowhere in sight. The fifth and final disappearance occurred 16 days later, on October 28, 1950. Frida Langer, 53, and her cousin Herbert Elsner left their family campsite to go on a hike. During the hike, Langer slipped and fell into the stream. She told Elsner to wait and she would go back to the campsite to change her clothes. However, she didn't return. On May 12, 1951, though, her body was found near Somerset Reservoir, in an area that had been extensively searched several months prior. No cause of death was determined. In at 2, lost and found. As I previously stated, only one body was ever recovered from the disappearances on the mountain, that being Frida Langer's, which was found the following May. Search parties conducted extensive searches, heavily combed the field she was found in, leading authorities to assume that there was indeed foul play. However, upon discovering her body, decomposition had already set in, limiting insight into her cause of death. However, it was the advanced decomposition which only served to further the mystery. More suspicious still was that Langer was the only body to be found. It has been noted that although there are dangerous wildlife on Glastonbury Mountain, an attack would definitely leave behind a ton of evidence, because as we know, bears don't typically swallow a person whole. The fact that there was zero evidence left behind frustrated authorities, with both Weldon and Jepson wearing bright red coats that would be easy to spot. Not to mention, Rivers and Langer disappeared seemingly into thin air without being too far away from other people. However, the strangest occurrence was that of Tedford, who seemed to have just disappeared into thin air on a moving bus that no one saw him leave. Weird. And finally, coming in at number 1, serial killer. The pattern of disappearances in the Bennington Triangle has led some folks to speculate that a serial killer was responsible. All of the people I previously mentioned who vanished did so within the winter, suggesting that something other than coincidence was at play. The first disappearance happened without a trace, and Langer's body was found in a location that had previously been searched. Perhaps the serial killer was on the loose and was incredibly successful at abducting and killing people near the highway or on the mountainside. And perhaps, like many serial killers, they were showing off when they placed Langer's body back out into the open following the extensive search already done in the location. It would also make sense why no traces have ever been found of any of the victims. However, saying that, it would be incredibly risky for a serial killer to abduct people in plain sight and near witnesses, especially on a moving bus, which in turn has left a lot of doubts in people's minds. Perhaps it was something more supernatural. However, that explanation tends to lack substance. When newspapers first reported on the Bennington Triangle, the explanation was tied into Native American legends. However, in the 1990s there was a shift towards UFOs and other ideas popularized by the X-Files. Regardless, we may never find out what truly went on in the Bennington Triangle.